Hello and welcome to church. Welcome to London Live at 5 online. We are still meeting in this way, but we are hoping and praying it will not be for long. I hope you got to enjoy some weather. We've had a beautiful sunshine the last few days, so hopefully you got to enjoy some of this. A few of us have been meeting in park as well as a church in the last couple of weeks, and today there will be some people meeting in London Live, little gathering at Holland Park in London, and keep watching our announcements, because very often we will announce things like this when we meet outside in the open, because we can. So as we go forward into our worship today, the speaker will be a brand new person. We have never had a message from him, but he's not a stranger to us. Bryan Maxwell. He is the husband to our very own Ruth Maxwell, who is our LondonLive Community Choir director. So we are very much looking forward to the message that God has for us through him. Before we go ahead, I would love to read to you from Psalm 113. Praise the Lord. Yes, give praise, all servants of the Lord. Praise the name of the Lord. Blessed be the name of the Lord, now and forever. Everywhere, from east to west. Praise the name of the Lord. For the Lord is high above the nations. His glory is higher than the heavens. Who can be compared with the Lord our God, who is enthroned on high? He stoops to look down on heaven and on earth. He lifts the poor from the dust and the needy from the garbage dump. He sets them among the princes, even the princes of his own people. He gives the childless woman a family, making her a happy mother. Please join us in our worship today.
Tando?
Tando did not mind dogs. Not all dogs, just some dogs. He didn't mind the little tiny dogs that some people put in their handbags, that are so small that you could knock them for six, or that if you're a rugby player, you would be able to drop kick out of the park. Not that anyone would want to do that. That would be very cruel. He didn't mind little dogs at all. Tando did not mind old dogs either. The type of dogs that spend all day lying in the shade, flicking flies away with their ears, and thumping their tail on the ground like excited beavers. Old dogs that were too old to chase little boys. He did not mind those kind of dogs either. He could outrun any old dog, and he was not frightened of old dogs at all. He didn't mind fat dogs. Fat, chubby dogs whose owners had overfed them and whose bellies were so big that they dragged on the ground and made it difficult for the dogs to run. He didn't mind those kind of dogs at all. In fact, those were the kind of dogs he was least worried about. These dogs could only run for a few steps before plopping on the ground, panting with their tongue sticking out. He quite fancied his chances against those type of dogs. There were some dogs that Tando did not like. He did not like the pit bull terrier at number 38. Now, you may call that type of dog a pit bull terrier where you're from, but where Tando was from, that type of dog was called a lockjaw. A lockjaw. Legend had it that when a lockjaw bit you, it did not let go. And lockjaws were also known to be very loyal and friendly to their owners, but they were nasty and vicious to everyone else. Lockjaws have been known to bite crying babies, and they also have a reputation for killing cats. These dogs are so agile, fast, and strong that in the old days they were the main type of breed used in dog fights, and dogs were selectively bred for their fighting prowess. You will appreciate that dog fighting has been banned in most parts of the world, and rightly so if you ask me. Lockjaws do not seem to know this. They will fight, growl, snarl, and chase any human or animal that enters the territory. These dogs are considered so dangerous that when their owners take them out in public, they have to muzzle them. The Lockjaw at 3848 was not muzzled. Its owner, Mr. Dlamini, used it as a guard dog and purposely let it freely roam around his yard to deter would-be intruders. There was a huge sign at the gate of 3848 that warned thieves in English to beware of the dog, in Isintu to Lemuga Inja, and in Isilapalapa to Basopolo Inja. The Lockjaw was so vicious that Mr. Dlamini put it in a strong lead whenever he took it out when he was going to the shops. Even then, it would strain at the lid, wanting to bite anyone who came near it. Whenever the Dlaminis had to open the gate to drive out of the yard, they would chain the Lockjaw to a metal stake that had been hammered securely into the ground. Tando did not like that dog at all. Every time he and his best friend Gerald, or Stooms as Tando called him, walked past 3848 on the way to and from school, the Lockjaw would come rushing to the fence, barking, snarling, growling, and baring his teeth at them. The Lockjaw was a scary, hungry-looking animal. The sort of dog that came at you at great speed, wanting to bite and tear bits off you. It would follow Tando and Stooms down the length of the fence, trying to jump over the fence. But it was too short and stocky, and only managed to get halfway up the fence. The Lockjaw would use all of his 30-kilogram mass to try to get at them. The Lockjaw was a frightening combination of muscle, saliva, and teeth. And it would hurl itself at the fence again and again and again. The boys thought this was hilarious. "Look at that silly dog," they would say to one another. "This dog is crazy. It's insane. Can it see that it can't jump over the fence?" Some days, the Lockjaw seemed to be waiting for them to pass by. It was almost as if it knew what time they would be arriving. It did not react when the other children walked quietly by, but went berserk as soon as Tando and Stooms approached. Day after day, on the way to and from school, Stooms and Tando would tease the Lockjaw. They would rattle sticks along the fence at 3848 as they walked. This would incense the Lockjaw, and it would run up and down the length of the fence looking for a way out to get at the boys. Some days they would shout at the Lockjaw, "Uyinja! Uyinja!" which means, "You're a dog! You're a dog! Ja, dog!" This became a regular game for the boys. They would rattle the fence at 3848 and shout at the Lockjaw. When the Lockjaw tried to jump over the fence, they would say, "Futsak, futsak," to it. For those of you who don't know, futsak is a word that should only be directed at dogs really, or unruly dogs at that, and some other disobedient animals. It is mainly used in Southern Africa, where dog owners say futsak to the dog. This dog listen and come to heel. The Lockjaw did not listen to Tando and Stooms when they told it to futsak. They did not own the dog, they were not its masters, and the dog knew this. When they told the Lockjaw to futsak, it just got angrier and angrier. Every day, as part of their routine, Tando and Stooms would tease the Lockjaw by rattling the fence and saying, "Futsak," to it. Some days, the Lockjaw started barking just at the sound of their voices as they approached 3848. A few times, Mr. Dlamini came outside when Tando and Stooms were teasing the Lockjaw. He would say to them, wagging his index finger at them, "My boys, stop teasing this dog. This is a dangerous animal and he can seriously hurt you. Injaleza liluma man. This dog will bite you." The boys would look at Mr. Dlamini and say, "Yes, Mr. Dlamini. No, Mr. Dlamini." And then when Mr. Dlamini was out of eyesight and earshot, they would laugh and mimic him, waving their forefingers at one another, saying, "My boys, stop teasing this dog. This is a dangerous animal and he can seriously hurt you." They would giggle and laugh as they went along. Tando and Stooms did not listen to Mr. Dlamini. They were having way too much fun to stop teasing the Lockjaw. The dog was always safely locked inside the fence and couldn't get out. It had never gotten it out and it never would. They were safe on their side of the fence. They were having way too much fun teasing the dog and had gotten away with it as many times, and they would keep getting away with it. They did not heed Mr. Dlamini's warning. There was another dog on Tando Street. A reddish-brown Rhodesian Ridgeback at 3842. This one was far worse than the Lockjaw at 3848. It was a big, huge dog, the sort of dog that a 9-year-old boy couldn't outrun. The Ridgeback could easily jump over the fence and hedge at 3842, but thankfully its owners kept it on a long leash that ended just short of the hedge. It had a deep, booming bark that sent shivers down Tando's spine. Ridgebacks are fearless, ferocious dogs, and back in the olden days, the Nguni people of southern Africa raised Ridgebacks as hunting dogs to hunt game and even predators such as lions and leopards. They didn't call the dogs Ridgebacks back then, but simply called them Izinja, which means dogs, which kind of makes sense. Anyway, the Ridgeback at 3842 was different from the Lockjaw at 3848 in that it did not come charging at Tando when he walked past 3842. It had a nasty habit of flying quietly behind the hedge and then go woof whenever Tando walked past. It did not bark from a distance as any decent dog would, but would wait until Tando arrived at the spot it was waiting and then go woof, scaring the wits out of Tando. If people could jump out of their skin, then Tando jumped out of his skin every time the Ridgeback boomed at him. Whenever Tando dared to peer at the Ridgeback through the gaps in the hedge, the Ridgeback always looked like it had a huge grin on its face. The Ridgeback was also crafty in that he did not wait at the same spot every day, but moved to different spots along the hedge so that Tando never knew where and when it would bark at him. Some days it did not bark at him at all. It was always a horrid shock when it happened, and Tando would always sprint the rest of the way home afterwards, with his heart beating fast in his chest. One morning, as Tando and Stooms were chatting merrily away on the way to school, with sticks in hand at the ready to rattle the fence at 3848, Stooms suddenly cried out, "Lockjaw!" Tando stopped in mid-sentence, looked where Stooms was pointing, and there was the Lockjaw standing with the gate open. The gate was open. The gate was open? Yes, the gate was open. Not only was the gate open, but the Lockjaw had somehow managed to pull the long metal stake out of the ground, and this dangled at the end of the chain. Tando took all this in an instant. The Lockjaw had an "I've got you now" look on his face. There was no need for anyone to say anything. With perfect synchronicity, Tando and Stooms turned and bolted up the road the way they had come towards Tando's house, with the Lockjaw chain and stake trailing behind it in hot pursuit. Now, to be quite honest, Tando was not worried. He was slim, he was trim, and he was a very fast runner, and he was wearing his light, flat, Bata school shoes. He was the fastest runner amongst my boys, and always emerged as the victor, usually by a meter or so in every race. Stooms, on the other hand, was usually the last to finish every race, also usually by a meter or so. His name was Gerald, but the Maboys called him Stooms rather unkindly because it was a reference to his weight. Gerald liked to eat more than anything. He was the first at the dinner table and the last to leave. He out-ate all the Maboys whenever they had eating competitions, and you were almost always sure he had some sort of snack in his pocket, whatever time of day it was. As a result, Stooms was more heavily built than the other Maboys. He looked like a jolly little brown Father Christmas, without the beard and the white hair, of course. To put it bluntly, Stooms was a chubby kid. He wasn't so chubby that he needed hospitalization, but he was chubby enough for the rest of my boys to tease him about it. When he jumped up, his tummy remained at the bottom, and when he came down, back down, his tummy went up. When he wiggled left and right, his tummy swung to the left and right, in the opposite direction to the wiggle. Stooms could also make his tummy wobble just like jelly in a tub does when you shake it. Then my boys had hours of fun with this. Stooms did not really mind the nickname. He always responded philosophically, sticking his belly out and stroking an imaginary beard. Indlovu ayisindwa ngumboko wayo, which means an elephant's trunk does not weigh it down. All the my boys had nicknames for one another, so Stooms didn't care that the my boys called him Stooms. So even as Tando and Stooms tend to flee from the Lockjaw, Tando was not the least bit concerned. Stooms had never won a race. He was not built for speed. This was a scientific fact. So Tando thought to himself, even if this Lockjaw catches up with us, I have nothing to fear. I'm a lot faster than Stooms. I will simply outpace him, and the Lockjaw will get him instead of me. It will be sad for Stooms, but it's every man for himself. With an air of confidence, Tando tore up the road with his knees high, his chest forward, and his arms and legs moving in perfect running form. But Tando had made one small miscalculation. He had failed to factor in the effect of fear in his Stooms equation. The boys ran up the road screaming for help, their satchels bouncing up and down on their backs and the school ties trailing behind them. Tando maintained pole position, with Stooms thundering at full pelt and breathily heaving behind him. But then, to Tando's surprise, out of the corner of his eye, he caught sight of Stooms just behind his left shoulder. This was too close for comfort, so he quickened the pace. He had never run so fast before. His toes barely touched the ground and his arms pumped up and down. This was life or death situation, and he was too young to die. Amazingly, Stooms also quickened the pace and remained just behind Tando's shoulder. Ah! Tando cried out loud. Astonishingly, Stooms was now at his side, matching him stride for stride, but puffing away like a steam train and his arms flailing like a windmill. Tando could hear the Lockjaw just behind him. My Bobo! My Bobo! Help! Help! He shouted. At this point, Stooms accelerated a bit more and was now a stride ahead of Tando. Help! Help! Inja! Inja! Dog! Dog! Tando shouted. Stooms was now a meter or so ahead of Tando. Tando came to the shocking realization that the Lockjaw would get him first rather than Stooms. Forgetting his perfect form, he clawed at the air to try and run faster. To no avail. Stooms remained ahead of him. Tando turned his attention to the Lockjaw. Footsack! 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 The Lockjaw did not footsack. He screamed again, Footsack! Footsack! But the Lockjaw did not footsack. In fact, this just made it angrier and angrier. In desperation, Tando turned toward the gate of the house nearest to him and vaulted over the gate. Unbeknownst to him, he had jumped into 3842, right into the lair of the Rhodesian Ridgeback. The Ridgeback lunged towards him with a mighty woof, every muscle straining against his chain. Tando vaulted over the gate again into the street, straight into the path of the Lockjaw, which hurtled towards him with eyes red with violent rage. Tando took off his satchel and held it in front of his body to protect himself. The Lockjaw grabbed it, and for a minute or two, Tando and the Lockjaw wrestled over the bag. The Lockjaw won, snatched the satchel out of Tando's hand, and carelessly tossed it aside. Tando's life flashed before him. This didn't take long. He was only 9 years old. This is the end, he thought to himself. I'm about to die. He waited for the dog to devour him and adopted a crouching defensive stance to make himself smaller and protect his vital organs. Suddenly, a whistle rang through the air. And then a voice said, "Danger! Fuzak! Waza!" It was Mr. Dlamini. At hearing his master's voice, the Lockjaw immediately stopped his frenzied attack on Tando, turned on its heel, and meekly trotted towards his master, wagging his little stump of a tail as it approached him. Mr. Dlamini secured the dog chain against the metal post and walked back to 3842, where Tando was still trembling, shell-shocked from his ordeal. "Did danger bite you?" Mr. Dlamini said. "No," Tando said. "Are you hurt?" Mr. Dlamini continued. Once again, Tando shook his head. "No." By this time, Stooms had also made his way back to 3842, where Tando was standing, clutching his satchel to his chest. Mr. Dlamini addressed both boys. Waving his long index finger, he said to them, "I warned you boys about teasing my dog. You were lucky that I was there to call him off. Otherwise, he could have done some serious damage to you. You were lucky this time. You may not be so lucky next time." He gave them one last warning look and said, "Don't tease the dog," and turned and went back to his house. The boys walked in silence past 3848. It was only when they were sitting safely in the bus on the way to school that Tando found the strength to say to Stooms, "Ah, Stooms, how were you able to beat me?" Stooms replied, "Tando, I keep telling you, indlovu ayisindwa ngumboko wayo." An elephant is not weighed down by its trunk. The Bible that Christians read tells us of a God who lived in heaven, which is in a galaxy far away from Earth, and heaven is his capital city. This same God created many angels, and one of those angels was Lucifer, who became Satan the devil. Now, this same God created the world and placed a man named Adam and a woman named Eve in a garden that he named Eden. This was a beautiful paradise garden. And they were there doing their thing and living and enjoying one another and all the animals and all the creatures that God had created. Now, while all this was going on, up in heaven, Satan mysteriously and nobody quite understands, became jealous of God, and he wanted to become like God. Now, Satan was a created angel, remember, so he wanted to become like the Creator. So God explained to him that, listen, I'm the Creator, I made you, you and I are not equal. But Satan wasn't having this. He went around heaven telling lies to all the angels, saying, God is unfair, why is he doing all this? Oh, God is so unfair, and things are not good. So in the end, God pulled him aside and said, listen, you got to stop this because this is not good. But it turned out that about a third of the angels in heaven were won over to Satan's side. When he carried on with his rebellion, God had no choice but to just get rid of him out of heaven. He didn't quite drop kicking him out of heaven, but he threw him out of heaven. The Bible says Satan fell down like lightning into the earth. Now when he came to the earth, he headed straight to the Garden of Eden where Adam and Eve were, and somehow got into the body of a snake, or changed himself into a snake, and went to the one place where God had said Eve and Adam should not go and eat of. There was a tree in the middle of the garden, and Satan tricked Eve into eating that fruit. And when Adam came and saw that Eve had eaten the fruit, he ate the fruit too. Now God had said to Adam and Eve, don't eat the fruit, and he had done that as a test of their love for him. He wanted them to obey him out of love, rather than being scared or God's going to do something. So he put that test in there, and Adam and Eve disobeyed God. Now this act of Adam and Eve disobeying God and acting contrary or against what God had said is what the Bible calls sin. So sin is doing something that God has said to you, don't do. Okay, in the story that I've just told, I'm just going to give you a key how to understand this story. Tando represents you and me, and the Lockjaw and the Ridgeback, the dogs, represent sin. I want to share some points about sin that we learned from this story. And the first point that I want to share is that there was a warning on the gate to 3848 that said in 3 languages, beware of the dog, Limuga Inja, and Basopolo Inja. Funnily enough, Tando and Stooms could understand all 3 languages, and there was nothing wrong with their eyesight. The warning was in plain sight. Tando and Stooms had perfectly good eyesight, and every day on the way to school and back from school they would read that warning, but they chose to ignore it. It was there in bold handwriting, but they chose to ignore it. They thought they could tease the Lockjaw and get away with teasing the Lockjaw because they had gotten away with teasing the Lockjaw many times in the past. They were having way too much fun to stop. Now, you may not know this, but the Bible has several warnings about the dangers of sin. The Bible has been translated into many languages, maybe even into your language, but many people choose either not to read the Bible or to ignore the warnings about sin in the Bible. Just like Tando and Stooms, they are just having way too much fun with sin to stop doing what they're doing. Nothing bad has happened to them, and they think nothing ever will. Mr. Dlamini was aware of how dangerous the Lockjaw was and told Tando and Stooms to stop teasing the dog. The boys ignored Mr. Dlamini and made fun of him, treating him like he was a clown or some other source of entertainment or hilarity. In the same way, God is aware how dangerous sin is and warns us in the Bible not to separate ourselves from Him and expose ourselves to sin. The whole Bible is about how God wants to get back together with us and eventually get rid of sin. However, many people laugh away the warnings in the Bible, and when Christians share with them about the Bible, they make fun of the Christians, and the warnings from the Bible are treated as if they are jokes and nonsense. But you know what? Making fun of the Bible does not necessarily mean that the warnings in the Bible are not true. The second point I want to share from this story is that Tando and Stooms believe that the Lockjaw would always remain safely behind a fence and a gate. I mean, they teased the Lockjaw many times. I mean, they sincerely believe this because every time they walked past number 3848, the Lockjaw was safely behind a fence and a gate. However, just because they sincerely believe this did not mean that what they believe would always be true. Getting away with teasing the Lockjaw a few times in the past was not a guarantee that they would get away with it in future. Likewise, many people have been getting away with sin, or one sin or another, for many years. They know that God is not happy with what they're doing, but they continue doing the same thing over and over, that same thing that they know makes God unhappy, even because they just want to enjoy the sin, even if it's just for a little while. Some of them even think, you know what, I'm going to change, but not just yet. Let me just enjoy the sin. They think they have the sin under control and just where they want it to be, but just like the Lockjaw, their sin will find them out and get at them at a time when they least expect it. There was absolutely no need for Tando and Stooms to tease the Lockjaw. They were on their way to school, and teasing the Lockjaw was not a necessary part of that journey. It was not on the syllabus. Other children managed to walk past 3848 without teasing the dog or annoying it in any way. The other children may have wanted to give in to the temptation. They may have thought about it, but they didn't give in. Tando and Stooms both thought about it and gave in. Many people have the desire to do things that God tells them not to do. In other words, to sin. However, being tempted to do the things that God does not want you to do does not mean that you have to give in to the desire to do those things. God in the Bible says to be tempted is not sin. Sin happens when you give in to the desire to do the things God has said not to do. However, God is able to give you strength to walk away from temptation. All you have to do is ask Him. The final point I want to share in this story is that Tando could not save himself from the Lockjaw. It's true that he was slim and he was trim, but he was not slim or trim enough to run away from the Lockjaw. He could even outpace Stooms, who after all was not built for speed. And when he tried to save himself by vaulting over a gate to another yard, he landed at 3842 at the home of the Ridgeback. Trying to save himself from one dog landed him at the home of a bigger dog. It is the same when we try to conquer sin in our own strength. We can't outrun sin, we can't outjump sin, and we definitely cannot outfork sin. We cannot have victory over sin on our own. Sin is far too strong, too fast, and too agile for us. It takes someone outside of us to give us victory over sin. Tando's efforts to stop the Lockjaw chasing him yielded no result. As he was running, he was yelling, "Futsak, Futsak," and Futsak to the dog, but the dog did not respond to him because he didn't have the authority to tell it to Futsak. He wasn't the dog's master. However, Mr. Dlamini only had to whistle and say Futsak once and say Woza, and the dog turned around and went to Mr. Dlamini. What made the difference? Mr. Dlamini, as the dog's owner, had authority over the dog. Even the dog was aware who was in charge of the situation. Tando and Mr. Dlamini used the same word, Futsak. There was no power in that word when it came out of Tando's mouth. But when the word came out of Mr. Dlamini's mouth, it had power. And it had the power to turn that dog around and to stop the dog in his frenzied attack of Tando. Similarly, God has authority over any sin that may trouble you or that may tempt you. Because God, as creator of human beings and of the universe, and as the God of heaven, came down onto this very earth and lived a perfect life and died so that we don't have to die and be overcome by sin. God has made provision for you to live a sinless life. All He asks of you is that you surrender your life to Him, and He will gladly accept you. Won't you give Him a chance today?
You
Thank you, Bryan, and thank you, worship team, for this beautiful time in worship today. I would love to encourage you at this point to be open to support your church. There are a number of ways you can do this. You can return your tithe, offerings, and also you can contribute to our hardship fund. The details where you can do this and the bank accounts are coming up on the screen now. So we would love you to partner with us. We would love you to be free and test God and see how good He is to you if you obey Him. So I encourage you to do this now. At the same time, if you need anything to be prayed for, if you're struggling financially, or if you're struggling spiritually, please get in touch with us. We would love to talk to you. We would love to encourage you. We would love to have a prayer with you. So please use any media on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube channels, or any way you can. Please get in touch with us. We would love to help you. So at this point, I have a little announcement to make. This week, I have been sent, and it's not a news to many of us here, but in the wider community, we have a graduate, and not just any graduate. Shay Shepherd, who very often worships with us in church, and he leads the church in worship, has graduated from the Brunel University with absolute top honors in mathematics. So we as a church congratulate her and wish her all the best in the pursuit of her new career, and looking for a new job. I understand she's looking for work. So we are absolutely delighted to hear that she has finished at absolute top level. So Shay, congratulations, and looking forward to seeing you in church soon. Anyway, that's all for today. Hope you enjoyed and were blessed and encouraged. I wish you a great week. See you soon. Bye-bye.